Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to part four of our 12-part series called Turning the Page, a self-guided Recovery Dharma book study course where we go through the entirety of the Recovery Dharma workbook. And as I say in most of these videos, if you don't have a copy of the book, get a copy of the book. Get a copy of the book. We even have a free PDF, a link for a free PDF linked for the free PDF in the description below. And in this video, we're going to talk about the Four Noble Truths. And we have a lot to talk about today. So I think I'm just going to cut right into the video. So, yeah, Four Noble Truths. Well, what are the Four Noble Truths? And let's talk about that, huh? That sounds like a plan. Okay, so Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths are at the core of this program. They're a really, really, really big deal in Buddhist philosophy. If you took some type of like comparative world history or a world religion class and you learned only one thing about Buddhist philosophy, you're probably like, oh, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path. Like, yeah, sure. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, good idea. The structure of these videos, if you're not familiar with the structure of the videos, is that in each section, I will cover the main theme of any given section, or in this case, multiple sections that we're going over. I'll then share what I highlighted in my book, and then hopefully you'll follow along and see what you highlighted in your book, what you took notes on. And ultimately, I'll also share some action items, some personal experiences as to, as an individual who's been doing this for 4+ years of recovery Dharma work, 15+ years of recovery community experience. What are the things that stand out to different people in the in-person meetings? Having mentored a number of people through the Recovery Dharma program, the hope, the aspiration, the goal of these videos is that wherever you're at, whether you have a Recovery Dharma community around you or not, you should be able to get the help, support, and encouragement to go through this book, go through these inquiries, learn this program, and be able to start your own meeting somewhere. So, um, yeah, that said, Four Noble Truths, let's just jump into the first quote on page 8. Page 8. Let's just find out what Four Noble Truths are, and we'll go from there. As people who have struggled with addiction, we're already intimately familiar with the truth of suffering. Even if we've never heard of the Buddha, at some level we already understand the core of the teachings, and that in this life there is suffering. Yeah. It can be incredibly liberating to hear this said so plainly and directly. No one is trying to convince us or convert us. No one is telling us we have to believe in something. No one is sugarcoating our experience. I love that line. No one is sugarcoating our experience. The Buddha also taught the way to free ourselves from the suffering. Thank goodness. When the Buddha awakened, he understood how samsara, or the cycle of existence, came to be and how it is maintained. The heart of these teachings, which we call the Dharma, i.e., the Dharma of Recovery Dharma, is the Four Noble Truths. These truths and corresponding commitments are the foundation of our program. One, and these are important. One, there is suffering. We commit to understanding the truth of suffering. Two, there is a cause of suffering. We commit to understanding that craving leads to suffering. Three, there is a path, there is a way of ending suffering. We commit to understanding and experiencing that less craving leads to less suffering. Four, there is a path that leads to ending suffering. We commit to cultivating the path. Like a map that shows us the path, these truths help us find our way in recovery. Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways that you can phrase the Four Noble Truths, but that's the Recovery Dharma phrasing out of the Recovery Dharma book. And since it's a book study, I figure it'd be a good way to start this video as to what the Four Noble Truths are, that they are the core of a lot of Buddhist philosophy. Another way to think of the Four Noble Truths, and this is more of an analogy that was given to me by a monk down at Magnolia Grove, which is a Buddhist monastery out of Mississippi in the Tetnahan Plum Village tradition. The first noble truth is acceptance that there is suffering. The second noble truth is that there is a path towards more suffering. The third noble truth is that there is a path away from suffering. And the fourth noble truth is committing to that path. And I'm a visual thinker. This is how I internalize things. I love that concept of that there is suffering, but there is a path towards more suffering. There's a path away from suffering, and it's committing to this path away from suffering. Another way to internalize or think about the Four Noble Truths, as far as a memory aid of sorts that I give people locally, is that the origins of the Four Noble Truths are historically associated with Indian medicine and as well. So in Indian medicine, it's a four-step process, or at least ancient Indian medicine, as it's been explained to me through different texts in regards to Buddhist practice. One, there is an illness. Two, there is a cause of the illness. Three, there is a medicine for the illness. Four, take your medicine. So that's another very effective analogy for thinking about internalizing or reflecting on the Four Noble Truths, because I know that they aren't as intuitive as one would hope they would be. But I find the concept of the path out towards and away from suffering to be helpful when teaching this to new people. I also find the analogy of acceptance that there is an illness or an addiction. There is a medicine for said illness, or there's a cause of the illness, and there's a medicine for the illness, and that we need to commit to taking our medicine. Four-step process. So, taking these one at a time. Let's just jump into these. The first one being the first noble truth: there is suffering. And the quote that I think summarizes this really well for new people is on page 9, near the bottom, where it starts. How many mornings did we wake up hating ourselves, vowing to never do again what we did last night, only to find ourselves repeating the same mistakes again just a few hours later? Yeah, check the box on that one. How many times did we attempt to cure our addictions with therapy, self help books, cleanses, more exercise, or by changing a job or relationship? How many times did we move thinking our shadow wouldn't follow us? How many promises did we make? How many times would we break those promises? Having suffered and struggled with addiction in its many forms, we've come to understand the first truth as it relates to recovery: addiction is suffering. Addiction is suffering. That's the first point. The first point in the first noble truth is there is suffering. And I summarize this, and others internalize this as well, is that addiction is suffering. It's the acceptance of all the ways that addiction is suffering. Throughout this section, it just talks about all the ways that addiction is suffering. It outlines it in such wonderful detail. I mean, it really does a great job of explaining it, that, suffering occurs whenever we fail to see the true nature of our existence, when we insist on controlling and altering reality. We suffer because we keep expecting these temporary experiences to be permanent and absolute, and to satisfy our craving for pleasure and or avoid pain. The other thing I do like to share with and stress with new people when talking about the first noble truth is the last couple lines on the top of page 10. We're still trapped in the prison of suffering. In fact, we're reinforcing its walls every time we act on our addictions. Liberation comes when we gain a clear understanding of where our real power lies and when we are throwing it away. This is a program of empowerment. It's a path of letting go of behavior that no longer serves us. I love this line. It's a program of empowerment. It's a path of letting go of behavior that no longer serves us and cultivating that which does. Yeah. First noble truth: you sick, there's an illness. Addiction is suffering. If you don't view your addiction as suffering, that's fine. You do you, you live your life. But the purpose of the first noble truth, its applications in a Buddhist recovery program, and or at least in the Recovery Dharma, is to explore all the ways in which we have suffered in our active addictions. That gets in the inquiry portion as well. I'm going to cover that at the end of the video, so stay tuned. We're going to talk about all the inquiries and how they are important. Second noble truth, the portion that I want to highlight, is second noble truth: the cause of suffering. Okay, there's a cause of suffering. Good to know. Near the end of page 13, clinging to impermanent solutions for suffering results in craving. We experience craving like a thirst. Ugh. Like a thirst, an unsatisfied longing. It can become a driving force in our lives. If craving goes beyond simple desire, which is a natural part of life, that's right. So desire is natural, but if it goes beyond um, uh, simple desire, it often leads to a fixation, obsession, and delusional belief that we can't be happy without getting what we want and getting what we crave. It warps our intentions so that we make choices that harm ourselves and others. This repeated craving and obsessive drive to satisfy it leads to what we know as addiction. Addiction occupies the part of our minds that chooses our will, replaces compassion, kindness, generosity, honesty, and other intentions that have been there. Many of us experience addictions as the loss of our freedom to choose. It's the addiction that seems to be making our choices. And then I want to definitely close on the line: we become someone we're not, or we don't want to be who we are. Conditions and circumstances in and of themselves don't cause suffering. That's part of the equanimity meditation. They can cause pain or unpleasant experiences, but we add suffering on top of this when we think we need those circumstances to be different. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. That's what I'm going to say on that one. Um, I'll have more explanation at the end. There's a lot of reading in this section. This is probably the only video that's going to be doing this much reading. Bear with me on this one. Third Noble Truth on page 15. The third noble truth, ending the suffering. It says near the end of the first paragraph there, the third noble truth states that the end of craving is possible. Each of us has the capacity for recovery. Yes, each of us has the capacity to recover. Recovery is possible. We are responsible for our own actions and for the energy we give our thoughts and feelings. This means we have some control over how we respond to our own suffering because the unpleasant emotions take place within us. We create them through our response to experience. We don't need to depend on anyone or anything to remove the causes of our suffering. We may not be able to control anything out there, but we can learn how we choose what we think, say, and do. There is an end of suffering, and in our local Recovery Dharma circles, we refer to the third noble truth as recovery is possible. Again, we'll get into inquiries in a second. Let's wrap up on the fourth noble truth in its explanation on page 16. The fourth noble truth is the path that summarizes the essential elements to recovery. That's right, the essential elements to recovery or awakening and lead to the ending of suffering. It provides instructive practice for investigating and becoming aware of the conditioned responses we cling to. These are the 8 factors of the path. 1, wise understanding. 2, wise intention. 3, wise speech. 4, wise action. 5, wise livelihood. 6, wise effort. 6, wise mindfulness. 7, wise mindfulness. 8, wise concentration. My apologies. It's been a long day, but I'm going to plow through. These 8 factors can be divided into 3 groups. It then provides the 3 traditional groupings. Each of us will understand and practice each of these aspects of the eightfolds in our own way. I love that part. Own way. Develop our wisdom, ethical practice, and concentration as far as we can in any given moment, which then is teed up. Last thing that I'm going to read, and then we'll just talk for the rest of the video. We found that it is useful to make inquiry and investigation a normal part of our everyday routine, especially when we're feeling uncomfortable emotions or facing tough decisions. Whew. That was a lot of reading. That was a lot of reading for me, and I'm sure it was a lot for you to take in as well. So you're probably thinking to yourself, James, why did you do all that like at the same time? Why did you do all those readings together? Okay. The Four Noble Truths, if you and I were working together and walking through here, uh, we would go through all 4 of them together because they're a batch. And are they a lot to go through? Yeah, they're a lot to go through. They're the cornerstone and foundational part of Buddhist practice and Buddhist philosophy. But here, Here's the equally important part of why is the Four Noble Truths so important in Recovery Dharma? Okay, and this is something that I don't feel is stressed enough in the book, and hopefully this is something that I can share with you. Is that it's not until we get to the Four Noble Truths that we really get into inquiry questions, and as it said in the last paragraph there, inquiry questions are foundational and a fundamental part of our Recovery Dharma program. They are the fourth element of the practice. And if you would like to know more about inquiry questions, I have a full video on inquiry questions in the Quick Start Guide. And goes over the inquiry of the fourth guiding principle of the practice, and gives you a full outline of what is inquiry work. It's not until we hit the Four Noble Truths, and this is the important part, the Four Noble Truths, that we're really asked to start to do inquiry work. And this is really where you start to dig into self analysis, self inquiry, and you get into the causes and conditions. This is where we start to do the quote unquote work of recovery. In the Quick Start Guide, we've already committed to renunciation, abstinence, abstaining from our addictive behavior. We would already committed to a daily meditative practice. We'd already committed to going to meetings and have a meeting schedule. It's at this point in the Recovery Dharma program that we really hit a turning point of saying, okay, let's start to investigate the Four Noble Truths and let's start filling out some of these inquiry questions. And the inquiry questions, this is the most important set of inquiries for me to do with someone when I'm working with them one on one in person, is the first noble truth. If you look at the inquiry question, the first noble truth is essentially going through, all the things, just all the things that we did in addiction. Like, why do you feel you're an addict? Like, what are the harmful things? The inquiry question I want to go through and really heavily emphasize that if you're going to work recovery dharma, you need to address this question of the first inquiry. Begin by making a list of the behaviors and actions associated with your addictions that you consider harmful. Without exaggerating or minimizing, think about the things you have done that have created additional suffering to yourself and others. And then it goes on to say, for each behavior listed, write how you and others have suffered because of that behavior. So going through that inquiry, this is meant to be done with self-compassion and a sense of, helping the mentor understand, hey, what does addiction look like to you? And it's about getting honest. It's the theme of honesty, of doing, just saying, hey, what's the wreckage of your past look like? Why is this, coming to terms with addiction is a big part of the first noble truth, is saying addiction is suffering, which is the first major point there. The inquiry question on the second noble truth that I always have people um, fill out, again, it's the first one on there, is the list situations, circumstances, and feelings that you have used harmful behavior to try to avoid. We start to get into the causes and conditions. The second noble truth, another way to think of it, as Jack Kornfield phrases it, and I think Joseph Goldstein says this as well, is that suffering is whenever we want things to be different than how they are. In the second noble truth, when if you and I are working through this, I'd say, what are the feelings that you're unwilling to feel? That's a very Tara Brach line of saying, what are the feelings that you're unwilling to feel? What are the causes? What are driving your addiction? What's driving this behavior? For me, alcohol was my drug of choice. And I'll tell you, loneliness, depression, anger, self-loathing, anxiety, these were all very much driving things that were feelings that I was unwilling to feel with. I was unwilling to sit with. And that it was through a Buddhist meditative practice that I had to first come to terms with the degree of what my suffering was and what my addiction was and the harm that I was doing to myself and others. And then from there, start to dig into the causes and conditions of what are the things that I am avoidant of? What are the feelings that I'm unwilling to feel? What are the pleasures that I'm endlessly pursuing? What does that look like? And why am I doing these behaviors that continually end in self harm and just make me feel miserable? Which leads into the third noble truth in the inquiry of talking about. what makes it so hard? What resources are available to help you abstain and recover? List reasons you believe you can recover. Also, and list your doubts. What might the wise, compassionate part of you, your Buddha nature, say about these doubts? I'll be honest with you. I'm not a huge fan of the inquiry questions for the third noble truth out of the Recovery Dharma book. That's just my opinion, and I'm allowed to have my opinion. When I work with people locally, more often than not, I have them outline for me, why do you believe recovery is possible? What does recovery look like to you? Illustrate to me that, let's talk about the difference between emotional sobriety versus getting dry. That's a big stressor, in my opinion, of Buddhist recovery programs and of Recover Dharma, is the fact that ultimately we want you to heal. We want you to feel empowered. We want you to get better. We don't want you to just abstain from drugs, alcohol, and harmful behaviors. And ultimately, the fourth noble truth, and I apologize that this video is going pretty long at this point, is the inquiry question of understanding that recovery and ending of suffering is possible. What is your path to recovery and ending the suffering of addiction? Be honest about the challenges you might face and the tools and resources you will use to meet those challenges. Um, yeah, and I do like the last one. What does it mean to you to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha for your recovery? Yeah, let's put that one in orange. What does it mean for you to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha? If you're going to work the Recovery Dharma program, you need to have some type of answer to that question. I know I'm a stickler. You do you, but um, this stuff can save your life. It's saved my life. The Four Noble Truths: there is suffering, there's a cause of suffering, there's an end to suffering, there's a path of committing to the end of suffering. As far as summarizing those quickly and as succinctly as I can, the big takeaway, if I had just one big takeaway, as far as the homework assignment and or the takeaway of this section, is that this is where the work begins. This is where the work begins. This is where the inquiry begins. This is where we start to actually dig into our inner wisdom, our inner inquiry of saying, coming to terms with, what did our addiction look like? What did our addiction look like? What were the driving causes? What does recovery look like? And ultimately committing to that path of recovery. And if you want to commit to that path of recovery, it's good to acknowledge what the suffering was, what the causes were, what recovery looks like, and then committing to that path of recovery. You sick, here's why you're sick. There's medicine. Take your medicine. So hopefully some of that helps. This is a huge topic in Buddhist philosophy and in a practice. So it's very difficult to put together any type of video that summarizes this. I'm sure I left something out. I'm sure there were probably parts of it that could have been done better. But at the end of the day, I hope you got something out of this video. I hope you get something out of this book. Definitely read the book. And in the next video, we're going to start talking about the Eightfold Path, which is a lot easier to read. That's a lot easier to understand. And coincidentally, it's a lot easier to understand. And the first fold of the Eightfold Path is wise understanding. Yes, next week or next video, we'll be talking about wise understanding, and more specifically, cause and effect, one of my favorite topics. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, all that fun stuff. And I'll see you in the next video.